Welcome back. In this short video, we're going to touch on two concepts, the DoUntil loop as well as the PostTest loop. Currently, we're looking at a do-while loop that I used in a previous video. Just to remind ourselves, this particular program will output all of the numbers 1 through 10. So we can see that here. Instead of a do-while loop, we can use what's called a DoUntil loop. Whereas the while condition here specifies the condition in which we want to continue the loop. Just as the language says, do while counters less than or equal to num loops. If we would like to instead use a do until loop, we can do so. We replace the keyword while with until, but then we need to flip-flop our logic because a do until loop specifies the ending condition instead of the loop continuance condition. So we want to say do until the counter becomes greater than 10. Let's try it again. Notice the output is exactly the same. The user does not know that under the covers we're using a do until instead of a do while. It's important to know that a do until exists. You can certainly use it in any case where you could have used a do while loop. They're interchangeable, really. You can use either one. However, just remember that if you use a do until, you're specifying the condition to end the loop instead of the condition to continue the loop. The other example I wanted to touch upon in this video is what's called a post-test loop. So before we explore this program, just want to explain what a post-test loop is. All of the loops that we've seen prior, the do while where we're specifying a condition, the for loop, those are both what you call pre-test loops. Pre-test loops means that the test for continuation of the loop comes at the top of the loop before the body of the loop. So a pre-test loop has the test at the top, and a pre-test loop executes 0 or more times, meaning that theoretically, if our variables had been set to specific values or the user had supplied certain input, we might never execute the loop at all. Consider a loop that's a sentinel-controlled loop that asks the user to type XXX when done, and that user types XXX immediately, thereby bypassing the loop entirely. So pre-test loops execute 0 or more times, whereas a post-test loop always runs at least one time because a post-test loop has the loop continuation expression at the end of the loop. So in this particular example, I'll go over it in more detail what it's doing. I just want to point out that it does use a loop. We see the keyword do, but if you notice up at the top, whereas we would normally have a while up here for a pretest, we actually have the loop continuation condition down here at the bottom. So we have the keyword loop that we always had that specified the end of a definition of a loop, but now we have the condition while and then our expression that we're evaluating, our Boolean expression that's going to evaluate to true or false. Had this been a pretest loop, it would have said do while input equals y up here with just the loop keyword at the bottom. So what we're dealing with here is a post-test loop. And I tried to create a scenario where it made sense for the loop to run at least one time. So I'm going to go ahead and run this so we can see what this particular program does. I'm going to back up a second and draw our attention to the black window behind that says this program uses a random number generator to randomly select one of 5 programming tips. And then it output a tip, comment your code. And we could probably make this a little better by saying something like this is your tip prior to the words comment your code, just to kind of explain a little better what we're doing here. But then we are given a prompt that says, do you wish to continue, yes or no? So the user has the choice here to continue. Now the interesting part about this particular program is it always gives us at least one tip before it asks us whether or not we wish to continue. So I can type no, and my loop ends. If I try it again, it says comment your code. Looks like we're getting the same message. I can say yes with my Y, and it gives me a new tip, tinker with the code. And I can continue in this way and keep typing Ys, and it looks like it randomly generated the same message. Again, I only have 5 messages, so this doesn't surprise me at all that I've got the same message. In reality, we'd want a larger database of values to choose from, but that's okay. We can keep typing yes here. Keep calm and keep on coding appears in the background. And it just keeps on going in this way until the user finally types no or N. So this program, I set it up to always give at least one tip first before it asks whether the user wants to continue. And I thought that might be an example we could use because it illustrates an example where we would at least want to run the code inside the loop one time before asking whether or not we wanted to continue. So the program starts by explaining what the program does. And then it does something that we've never seen before and quite honestly is a bit out of the scope of this particular class, but we're using what's called a rand function here. It randomly generates a number, and we're supposed to take it times the upper bound of the range and add 1 to it. Putting all this together and converting it to an integer is the recipe for generating a random number between 1 and 5. And again, it doesn't explain in this chapter, it doesn't even appear in this book, but if I wanted to generate a random number between 1 and 10, I would change this 5 here to 10. But by executing this code once each time through the loop, I get a new value in the range of 1 to 5 that I assign to variable my value. And just to kind of refresh our memories, we could use nested if statements to determine which value was randomly selected and output the correct corresponding message, but I deliberately chose a select case just to remind us that when we're comparing a single variable over and over to multiple values, we can choose to use a select case as a selection structure instead of nested if statements. So here we have the keyword select case and then my value. My value is the variable that we're examining. And then we have a set of cases, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, each with their own corresponding action. So for example, if the random number generated for my value were 1, this would yield a match and we would output learn by doing. So this select statement is going to give us our output. Notice the last thing we do before the end of the loop is we ask the user if they want to continue. That sets us up nicely by assigning it to variable input, and then we can check that value with our post test loop condition down here to make sure that the user typed a Y. Now previously I showed you the DoUntil. And DoUntil loops could also be post tests. If I wanted to try this as a DoUntil, I would specify this as an until, and I would indicate my ending condition. So I want to keep looping while the input is n. Or I'm sorry, until the input is n. So I could keep saying, yes, I would like to continue, I would like to continue, no, I do not want to continue, and it works correctly. Okay, so just to reiterate that last thing that I said, if you use an until, whether it's a pretest or in this case a post-test, just make sure that you're specifying the condition for ending the loop.